I had a question in regards to a particular type of book on Tasawwuf, and it's a book which we call Qawaid al-Tasawwuf. Now, what type of book is this actually in Tasawwuf?
What's the author?
Oh, I would a famous one. I would especially say Sheikh Ahmed Zarruq. That's one used a lot.
Alhamdulillah. There are different books that have the title Qawaid al-Tasawwuf. There are different books.
Okay.
Some combine between suluk and tasawwuf. Some separate them. Some put them in different unit chapters and things. A good book on tasawwuf is as long as for each principle that they give you the amal of the early generations or ayah or hadith or ijma or what have you that sets up that principle. As long as that's there and the individual is reliable, in this case, Imam Ahmed Zarruq is reliable. No dispute about him. So the people that are reliable and that they give this for these kutub, there is no harm with this. There's a couple of different people. Sheikh Faris is teaching something. Sheikh Muhammad Sayyid is teaching something on this matter, right? So this is permitted as long as one of the things you have to be mindful of is when you teach any book, you have to be mindful to your audience, of your audience. What is their level of preparedness? So you come to visit me, I don't come and start teaching you al-Kafi in fiqh. This isn't a beginner's text. I work with you in the beginner text. If you're intermediate advanced, then obviously we do testing to see where you are, and then we build from there. This is what we do. The same thing with every science. You start with the matters that people are able to put into perspective and gather together. Once those matters are gathered together, now they can put them into practice. Now that they're putting them into practice, they might say, I want to do more. Oh, alhamdulillah, that's great. Let's do more then. Now you can do more because now they say, listen, I can bear more. I can do more. Okay, that's great. If they say that's enough for me, then that's sufficient. But you look at the condition of the people. The larger the book, the more patience the people will need to have. Their attention span. People's attention span grows over time. When they first start out, if you are giving people bayanet, where you're just telling them good matters and good affairs, you're giving short, powerful statements. Then after that come the halaqat. Then after that come the durus, where you're going through kutub or mutun, right? Understand the person that you're dealing with so that they have the things that they need and you assess them according to their needs. Because again, that's khidmah again. You're serving people according to their needs. So a fully grown adult might get 2 scoops of soup or 2 scoops of rice, but a small child, maybe half a scoop. You serve people according to their needs.
Okay, mashallah, jazakallah khairan. I'd like to ask you next, so in the West today, there are certain scholars known for Ihsan that are being used, their books being translated to English, and I would also say these books being abused now. From amongst them, there are Sheikhs Muhyi al-Arabi, Al-Jilani, and someone which we have an issue with, Mansur Al-Hallaj. Now, what is the reason? Why are these particular scholars being translated and being put out there in the English language?
First, you have to remember the first people to have ever translated these books were Orientalists.
Right.
They were some of the first people to have translated these books. Orientalists, Syncretists, as well as perennialists. These were the people who believe in the unification of all religions, or that syncretism is a means of getting knowledge. The Gnostics, who believe that salvation is in knowledge. These people that translated these works, you also have people who engaged in this from amongst the Muslims, or people that entered into Islam and engaged in syncretism. Idris Shah, Titus Buchart, William Chittick, Rene Gaon, Fridtjof Schoen, Martin Lings. These are all syncretists and people who engaged in syncretism. And syncretism and perennialism are carefully related. The belief that all religions are coming from some type of primordial religion, and that all religions are mixtures of other religions. And they tend to cite a statement that one man holds on to the ear of an elephant and says he has the elephant. Another man holds on to its leg, but they only have parts of the elephant. This is utter and complete foolishness. So this is one of the reasons why these are being translated, because if you go back to the 60s, the setup to this was important. And I'm going to relate how this is the case. Sure. In the 60s, a profusion of books entered the reading markets in the United States because of two of the most important figures of the New Age movement. Albert Pike, Anton Sands DeLevy, who's the second, and the third is Aleister Crowley. These people are the founding fathers, for lack of a better word, of the New Age movement, which is a belief in the deification and glorification of man, and the primordial nature of religion and the exaltation of mythology. This also allowed, these men could not have reached the level to do what they did without the World Parliament of Religions for the first time being held in 1898 in Chicago, Illinois, in which religious figures from different false religions came together and agreed to attempt to disseminate watered down forms of their religion by means of unifying them through perennial methods. So Hinduism came in as yoga, as a new health thing. It was also introduced through the Beatles, who were devotees of Swami Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta. And he's actually, as well as Aleister Crowley, back of one of the Beatles albums. So they used them to introduce this, and also recreational drug use, public recreational drug use. Within this organization, or within this time period, this movement, the TM movement, which was a rebellion against the 50s, which was the Stoicism era, which was a conservative era. So the people that are coming into the 60s era are rebels against their parents, which were conservatives. Now, at this time, you have Idris Shah, William Chittick, Titus Buchart, Fridtjof Schoen, Rene Gaon, Martin Lings. These people are coming into the 60s movement, this liberal movement. Even though Islam is not liberal, it's being seen as a liberal answer to conservatism of their parents. So people who are engaging in Hinduism or other affairs are also calling themselves Sufis.
Yeah.
Because the Tasawwuf is being seen as some type of release.
Yes.
So these people like Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and others that came to Antelope, Oregon, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh made himself the orchestral master over these people. And out of this, you had people now wanting to bring in more controversial voices from Tasawwuf. So you had Ahmed al-Alawi, you had his principles Tasawwuf twisted. Muhyi ibn al-Arabi, because he was known for having made ecstatic statements. Jalaluddin al-Rumi, known for having made ecstatic statements. So these people were brought into English before. The first ones that I can think of that brought them into English and there may be people who published it beforehand, Orientalists, but I'm talking about Muslims who did it,
Okay.
were Qazi publications, which are based in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, wow.
They're the first ones that I can think of that brought these books in there, and they are Shiites.
Oh, wow. SubhanAllah.
So they helped to bring this into. They also happen to publish a lot of these books by these corrupt Sufis as well, because Shiites and corrupt Sufis, they have a lot in common. Some of them have Mu'tazila leanings.
Yeah.
But they published a lot of these things. And this is why this is looked at, this idea of Eastern mysticism and transcendental meditation and yoga and releasing the God in you. And people are talking about energy. So now when you talk to people on the street, they're talking about energy and we're energy and my karma and your karma, my truth, your truth, stand in your truth. It's all energy, bad energy, good energy, vibes. People are talking about these things, and out of that quagmire, that muddy quagmire, is coming all of this stuff as well. Fons Vitae is one of those purveyors of filth in pushing out a lot of this garbage.
All right.
Yet they would insist that we're Muslim, right? So this is the reason for the spread of these things, because it's an attempt to neutralize any form of orthodoxy or orthopraxis, right belief and right action. It's an attempt to negate any of these things, and it's despicable.
Because the interesting is they're not translating the Tasawwuf books of, let's say, Ma'ruf al-Karhi, Junayd al-Baghdadi. It's really Rumi, Ibn al-Arabi. Mostly them. And you said it's because of their statements when it happened in an ecstatic mode, but it's not because people attribute perennialism to Shaykh al-Rumi and Ibn al-Arabi. But this was not the case.
No, this is not the case. And in fact, Mansur al-Hallaj, by ijma', because Junayd al-Baghdadi signed his death warrant.
Yeah. Could you explain this issue, what exactly happened?
So Mansur al-Hallaj, people say that he was an ecstatic speaker or what have you, but they had to assess when he said, "An al-Haq," I am al-Haq, and was inviting people to that. It was causing societal upheavals, because you had all these people saying that they're haq and refusing to make salah and all these other things. Okay, so what does this mean? And it was assessed that he was in his right mind, and when he said it, he meant the full sense of what that meant. And so the death warrant was signed by Junayd al-Baghdadi, and he was crucified.
Subhanallah.
So this is the truth of the matter.
And he, in a general sense, was he from Ahl Sunnah, Mansur al-Hallaj?
No.
Oh, he wasn't.
No.
I mean, in a general sense, even before the statements.
Well, he may have come from a family that was, but as far as him, the merits and things that we know of him is that he was involved in a lot of hideous and unsightly activities.
All right. Okay.
So his crucifixion was, and the death warrant for his death was for that reason.
Okay. SubhanAllah. And today, a lot of the Muslims here in the West, and I've experienced myself when you talk to a convert about Tasawwuf, their view on Tasawwuf is exactly this whole thing that you're talking about. It's this New Age movement stuff.
Yes.
As I mentioned, I was gathered with some people. There were some converts there, and I was raising some points of Tasawwuf. And this brother, who's a convert, he went into this weird type of Tasawwuf by quoting Rumi constantly. And it was very difficult to bear that, but I couldn't immediately start refuting and correct him, because again, then I wouldn't be using the correct method. But how do we correct these people? Like, because if I tell them this is wrong, you should do, I know that it's not going to work immediately, because they have been influenced with this thing for so many years.
Yes.
How
to correct these matters is, there are three ways in which this can be done. One is the dissemination of correct tasawwuf. The dissemination of this through the real kutub of tasawwuf. The second is remembering the pecking order. So when someone says, well, Imam Al-Rumi has said this, yes, but Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, who's Sultan of Awliya, he mentioned this. Because no one disputes that. There's a pecking order, right? And number three, to ask them, because sometimes when you ask people, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Sometimes they've never really thought through some of the wider ranging positions. They might hold positions that are completely incompatible with the religion, but they've not thought it through. So when they think about it, whoa, wait a minute, I actually don't believe that.
Yeah.
But it took them to sit through and think, oh, subhanAllah, no, I don't believe that's not my position. But it just sounded like something good.
Yeah.
But then when they think it through, they realize, actually, that's not good. Right? Because the goal of people who have perennialist or syncretist leanings is that we're all the same.
Yeah.
And that we're all referring to the same thing. But the easiest way to make people understand differently is to say, when the prophets came, did they destroy idols? Well, yes. Did they destroy statues? Yes. So it would appear to be the case that they're not all the same. That there was one true, righteous, everlasting, holy, righteous God, and that all others besides are false and do not exist and are things that men made. That's what it would appear to be the case.
Yeah.
And you have to have this discussion because some Muslims, again, 15 years is a long time to be in school.
Absolutely.
And they've imbibed these ideas. And so the process of trying to get them to think it through and divest it is a very careful and patient process. You can't take them out of it because you can't do it for them. You can't choose someone's food for them. You can't wash their hands for them. You have to have someone to say, well, I never thought about that like that. Or listen, are you sure? And it may be more than one meeting where you have this conversation.
Yes.
Because if they start expressing these ideas, they've at least been concealing it for as long as that. They've at least been concealing it for that long. So it might not be one meeting where they say, oh, subhanAllah, that's right. Yeah. Sometimes that can be the case, but in many instances, that's not. It's a slow process of realization. Oh, I didn't realize. Really? Right? These things happen to them. It's up to us to be patient, but diligent and determined.
And how do we address this topic? Because these Orientalists, they've made Tasawwuf completely something different. They term it Sufism, and they see it even as not even being a circle of Islam. And what is exactly the view that they have put out actually? Like, what are they are talking about? Like something like a cult, because they call it like mystic sect. They use these different weird terms about Tasawwuf.
With regard to this, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. This again goes back to the children of the New Age.
Sure.
So the children of Albert Pike, the children of Aleister Crowley, the children of Anton Sensley, the children of these are Idris Shah, William Chittick, Titus Bookart, Martin Lings, Rene Guon, Friedrich Schoen. These people are those children. You must understand that this is where it's coming from. Because they took from the New Age and Orientalist types. The reason why they associate it as something separate to Islam is because the ecstatic statements that are being made, people piercing themselves with swords, walking on coals yet not being burned, There's a parallel between this and the Pandits in Hinduism. There's a parallel between this and the Jain priests. There's a parallel between this and the sacred sparks of the Gaon of Judaism, because it's all from Shaitan. That's why it's hard for them to understand the science of Islam, because the original principle has been obscured by these ecstatic utterings and all these other things. It's been obscured. But if they actually had it explained to them, then they would realize, okay, these ecstatic utterings and all these other things, that's not the point.
Right.
That's not the goal. It's something else. But as long as these obscurities remain without being, as long as the obscurities remain without being properly assessed and then negated, then these doubts will remain. And you have to remember, some of the unbelievers that have this, they come from that 60s era where someone was in a Hindu ashram doing Kundalini yoga and also said that they were a Sufi.
Yeah, that's tough.
This was happening.
That is bizarre. What do you say about the term when they add ism, when they make it Sufism? Isn't that like, we don't translate that stuff, right? Like that.
Well, the usual thing when ism, the word ism is used, it's often used in reference to a movement.
Yes.
A movement or a particular social disposition. But Tasawwuf is not a social disposition within Islam. It's something that's part of the religion. And it's an attitude, a state of the heart, and a state of the limbs. But by calling it Sufism, it leaves the reader in his or her mind with the perception that perhaps this is some sort of social movement or an ideology. But the Tasawwuf is not about ideology. In fact, it negates ideology. But it takes a person with due care to see through some of these things. So I try to translate, I think this through, because translation is something that you have to think about these things. So I tend to translate as Tasawwuf, or the people that practice as the Sufis or the Sufiya, simply because of just trying to be as faithful as I can, to the text. But Sufism, that inclines an ideology like communism, socialism, fascism. Now, ISM or ism is usually in reference to ideologies or regimes, but Sufism, Tasawwuf is not really a regime. It's not really an ideology. It's not really a social disposition or an ideological movement. It's a set of principles within Islam for the completion of the religion that are part of the four rings. So I'm sort of resistant to the use of these expressions, because I worry about what may come into the mind of the reader who is subjected to this. My concern is for that, because my desire is that the reader, if I translate something, that the reader can read it and then make his or her own determinations after having read that and do research. I don't want to make the conclusion for him or her. I want to try to present the information as faithfully as possible, with the hope then that they will make that decision.
And what do you think about this particular? So some people, they put Tasawwuf and they write in English, purification of the heart. Do you think that's a limited translation?
It is limited, because Tasawwuf is that, but it's more of the states of the heart. And it's not just the heart, it's also the limbs.
Right, yes.
Because the limbs must be in congruence with the heart. Right? Wudu is not just about the water. It's not just, see, that's the fiqh of it.
Subhanallah.
But the other purification, that's the tasawwuf. So it's not just the water. If it was just the water, then tayammum would not have been legislated and sent down in place of it when you can't find water. So it's not just that. Just like it's not just the pure soil or dust. What's dust? Dust is for compost and growing the earth. And what's that about? So this is bigger than that. It's being able to appreciate that. That's why you'll find a lot of scholars under discussion, like in Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin, they talk about the fast, and then they'll say Israr al-Siyam, the secrets of the fast. Like there's okay, now there's the inner dimensions of it. So there's the outer dimension. Okay, you must make sure to abstain from food, sexual intercourse between these hours. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. It's like, okay, the inner dimensions. That's the tasawwuf of it. The inner dimensions, making sure you adhere to that as the fiqh, and then making sure that you're in congruity with in congruence with that is the tasawwuf. Understanding that you've got a refrigerator full of great food, but in the daytime of Ramadan, it's haram to eat that food to the same degree of anything else that Allah has declared haram. Even though that food's halal, but at this moment, between this hour and that hour, it's haram to eat it. Because he's righteous. And he's your master and king. And he decides when you eat, when you don't, when you sleep, when you don't, when you fast, when you don't. Those are the inner dimensions of it.
MashaAllah. There's one more thing that I want to ask about before we would continue. There are certain doctrines attributed to Imam Ibn al-Arabi and then perhaps also misinterpreted. And this is the doctrine of Hulul and Wahdat ul-Wujud. Now, what are these things about? Because these things are mentioned a lot and perhaps taken out of context as well.
Alhamdulillah. Imam Muhammad Ahmad al-Safarini discussed Wahdat ul-Wujud, and I cited this from Mustafa Shati in the Divine Texts. They, rahimahumullah, when discussing Wahdat ul-Wujud, there's two things in question. One is if somebody believes, there's two things to keep in mind. One is the understanding that there are two types of existence. There's a contingent existence, mumkin al-wujud, and this is the existence of all creation. It depends on the creator for its existence. It can't exist without the creator. Then there's wajib al-wujud, or qiyamuhu bi nafsi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is self-existent and not in need of anyone for his existence. This is true existence, its purest form. When somebody realizes and sees through the contingent nature of existence, and they realize that only Allah has the power over everything, only he, they see through the ephemeral nature of creation and they recognize that only he has power over everything. This is what leads to fana, which is either translated annihilation or melting, other different terms for this, or ceasing to be, right? This is what this is. And it says the person, all that remains is for Allah. What that means is that person, what he sees, what he drinks, what he eats, what he hears, he does that purely for Allah. When he puts his clothes on in the morning, or when he wakes up, alhamdulillah, that's what he says when he wakes up. He wakes up with this. When he washes his hands, Bismillah. He puts on his clothes. Alhamdulillah alladhi kasani hadha thawba wa razaqanihi min ghayri hawlin minni wala quwwa. When he heads to the bathroom, Allahumma na'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. When he leaves from it, غفرانك الحمد لله الذي يذهب عني الأذى وعافاني. This is fana. This is the truth of the matter. This is Wahdat ul-Wujud. When someone reaches this, he will sometimes say that he will say things like Subhani, glory be to me. Imam Taqiyuddin Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentions this in volume 11 of his Majmu' Fatawa. Someone will say, glory be to me, your glory. There's nothing under this Galabiyah but the truth, right? This is not referring to the belief in Hulul incarnation. It's that this person sees that everything belongs to Allah, that everything, he's truly worshiping Allah as if he sees him. That's what this is. Now, Muhyi ibn al-Arabi, he did not have permission to write down these things, meaning he couldn't put these things into a systemized fashion. So he went into Hal and wedged in these types of things, and he wrote. And often he had to turn and then write books that decoded, where you have to learn how to read these books to decode them, to read them, because the outward form of them is strange or could sound like kufr, but it's not what's intended. That's why I was very alarmed when I saw someone translate al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah into English and Fusus al-Hikam. Good Lord, why is that in English? Without any code, like I looked and I saw, okay, I'd still be resistant if it had maybe 450 notes with it, because there's so many other books that don't require the type of notation. But something like that, if they just had like a glossary of terms, an exhaustive footnoting system, where it's like, okay, listen, this is not referring to this, it's actually referring to this. Something that was systematic and detailed, so that someone reading that would not walk away with misgivings. Because these books are written in literary Arabic, and people of the time who were fluent in Arabic that read it walked away with misgivings. Now you're translating it into English, where you lose about 30% in translation. What do you think's going to happen when it comes into English? The same thing that happened when it was in Arabic. Misgivings.
Right.
So these things, such as Hulul and other areas that Shaykh al-Jilani rahimahullah warned of, and other affairs, Muhyi ibn al-Arabi didn't necessarily affirm these things, but it could look like that if these books were read without a careful eye. And Wahdat ul-Wujud, where I think the best explanation I've ever read of it in English, or ever read of it, is probably by Imam Mustafa Shati. And chapter 6 of or unit 6 of the divine text. He explained it. He kind of took Imam as-Safarini's principles around it and really concisely explained what it is. And it's, he gave ayat and ahadith where you can't deny that the only true real existence is Allah, because it doesn't depend on anyone else for its existence. And that, now, with that being said, that doesn't mean the existence that we have is a mirage and that we're not really here, or that the creation is Allah or Allah is the creation. No, they both exist. But the only truly existence in the most absolute sense of the word is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we depend on someone else for our existence. And then we have interdependent relationships where we depend on one another, like the child depends on the mother for the existence, and this person depends on, that's contingent. I mean, you see that the attributes that the lion has are contingent. He doesn't have his own life. Things like beauty, strength, might, awe, those aren't his. He doesn't own those. And Mustafa Shati rahimahullah, just like he said, just like colors can't be manifested unless they're being manifested by something. You can't think of a color without it being manifested by something, like a red wall or a blue door or the blue sky. Something has to manifest it. That is, in a nutshell, the unity, the unity of existence. That's what that means. Or soul existence, excuse me. I think that's how I translate in divine text, soul existence. That's what that is. The only solely existent is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When someone sees this, when they're worshiping Allah as if they see him, that's what's going to happen. They're going to see Allah in all things. not his essence, but they see him in all things as if they see him.
Is this also the same as the word ittihad, which is also thrown out there?
Ittihad is different.
Okay.
Ittihad is the belief that the slave and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they become one. And this is wrong.
Okay, subhanAllah. Okay.
Yes, this is incorrect.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, so I'd say for people to get a good picture of
Yes.
Wahdat ul-Wujud and these things about ittihad or Hulul, things like this, I would definitely say to pick up the divine texts again, and especially read that 60 unit, because it defends the principle of Tasawwuf, and it also discusses all these doubtful matters.
And Imam Mustafa Shabti, he praises these grand sheikhs like Imam Al-Rumi and Imam Al-Arabi, but
Yes.
the advice that you're giving us is that since they're written in literary Arabic and written in an ecstatic mode, so should we then be rather avoiding them since they're not really the mu'tamad in Tasawwuf?
Well, yes, we should be careful.
Okay.
And the sheikh, he praises them,
Right.
but he clears the air regarding the doubtful matters.
Okay.
But at the same time, he like the sheikh, when you look at the original Arabic, he doesn't cite the page numbers or anything like that.
Okay, mashallah.
Because he doesn't want people running and going to get, because that's the thing he's mindful of. He doesn't want that to happen.
Interesting.
But he also proves that, listen, it's not major kufr being said. There are other affairs at work, which I think is honest.
Yes, absolutely. MashaAllah, jazakallah khairan. Alhamdulillah. I mean, that cleared up a lot of things.